Good morning. It's the 9th of December 2017. Another Saturday is here with us, and we're grateful for that. Good morning once again, and welcome to the show. This is New Day, Saturday edition. We're live on TV3 here in Accra. We're also live on 3FM 92.7, and we're streaming live around the world online at 3news.com, also on our Facebook page at TV3 Ghana. As usual, we're running from now till 9:50, where conversations will be brought to a close. And we will, by that time, have interrogated some real issues or real topics that have made the headlines during the week. We encourage you to send in your contributions via our WhatsApp number 050-0607-070. We will be happy to share your views with the rest of the world. Coming up on the show this morning, we are looking back a year after election 2016. You do recall that today, 9th December, is exactly 1 year ago since the Electoral Commissioner, Madam Charlotte Osei, declared Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, candidate then running for the NPP, as the winner of the 2016 presidential elections, having polled some 5,716,026 votes, which represented 53.85% of the valid votes cast, to beat incumbent president at the time, John Dramani Mahama, who polled some 4,713,277 votes, representing 44.4% of the valid votes cast. And so it was that last year, the NDC's John 316 campaign song, aka Onapo, had become an overnight hit and was receiving so much unlimited airplay. You do recall that, I suppose. Now, many people in Ghana at the time celebrated the victory of Nana Addo Dankwa by dancing to this tune. And in the midst of all that celebration, many Ghanaians remained expectant relative to the many promises that Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and the NPP had promised. Talk about stimulating an industrialized economy, improving education, free SHS policy, stamping out corruption, job creation for the teeming youth, prudent management of public funds, revival of the struggling railway sector, just to mention a few. Now, 1 year after, we are asking the questions: has there been any change from changing over to Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo from John Dramani Mahama? Do you see any change? Please share with us what you think on this topic as we interrogate 1 year after election 2016. We'll also take a look at the devastation on the campus of Kumasi Academy. Earlier on in the year, 7 students of the school died under circumstances which at the time were considered strange. The public was subsequently informed that measures had been taken, and so the situation had been contained. Now, 7 to 8 months down the lane, we have reports of yet another 4 cases of deaths coming from this school. Could this have been avoided? Who has failed these young ones and their parents and guardians? We shall be interrogating the recent development at the Kumasi Academy, and also bring in the issue of how we place value, or whether or not we indeed place value on human lives in Ghana. How is our public and health safety system like? Is it functioning at all? What about our emergency response situation or system? Is it functional at all? Could it be made better? Obviously, yes. But how do we get to do that? Also up for discussion this morning is the ECG situation. You do recall that during the week, or all week long, customers of ECG in the Achimota, Kaneshi, Kolebu, and Dansoman districts of the ECG's Accra West region have been denied access to electricity for over a week now, following the crash of one of the ECG's servers. Now, the ECG informs us that the crash of the server made it impossible for the system to respond to customers' data on its old prepayment system. Disgruntled and disillusioned customers have been besieging the premises of the ECG project office, which is situated somewhere around the Kwame Nkrumah interchange, all week long, but are yet to have their problems sufficiently resolved. Meanwhile, the PURC, that's the regulator, has waded into the situation and is threatening to sanction the service provider by way of penalty payment if the situation is not addressed. Disgruntled customers interacting with the media appear to be in support of plans to bring in private sector participation to the ECG's operations. This clearly calls to mind the status of plans to privatize the ECG or to bring on board private sector participation into the ECG's operations, pursuant to the Millennium Development Authority's arrangement with the government of Ghana. Where are we on that whole agenda? We'll be interrogating that, and also closely we'll be looking at how best the ECG can deal with customers' problems. We'll take a break at this point. When we come back, I will introduce the panel for today's conversation. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday edition, live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and around the world. We are streaming live on 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. Quickly, let me bring in the panel for today's conversation. We'll start from my extreme left, where we have Mr. Abraham Amaliba. He is a lawyer and also a member of the NDC communications team, as well as the NDC legal team. Next is Naneje Bafwewa, who is a lawyer by profession as well. And last but not least, we have Akbar Rohula Komeni. He is a member of the NPP communications team. Akbar, I hope I got your name correctly. Very well. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Morning.
It's good to have you here. I want us to start off with the devastation at Kumaka. I mean, I'm describing it as a devastation because obviously that's what it is. And we'll start off looking at this rather unfortunate situation, but also to try to situate it within the appropriate context. This isn't the first outbreak of a deadly disease in this particular school. Now, earlier on in the year, in April, or sometime in March, I believe March, April, there were similar reports of an outbreak of a strange disease there. Now, we were informed subsequently that it was meningitis. I stand to be corrected, though. And at the time, it claimed 7 lives. Now, 7 months, 8 months down the lane, we have 4 more deaths. And this time, even though the Minister for Health tells us or informs us that majority of the samples that were tested tested positive for swine flu, the Ghana Health Service is also cautioning that we shouldn't, comprehensively think that this is, the determination, this is what caused the death. So at the moment, I think we can say that we don't have a definitive, confirmation of what exactly caused those deaths. But looking at the sequence of things, I'll start with you, Mr. Amaliba. 7 earlier, 4 subsequently. What do you make of the situation? Did we handle things well? Looking at the school authorities, health authorities, whichever stakeholders are involved, was this properly managed, looking at the timeline involved?
Let me start by saying good morning to your viewers. The situation that hit the Kumasi Academy, I must say, was quite a difficult one for parents and the students alike. It was so devastating that parents could not hold back, but had to rush to the schools to evacuate their wards. Now, in your introduction, you indicated that in April, or is it May this year, there were some mysterious deaths. And some samples, my understanding, were taken to Noguchi. We had a very long lull. There were no reports of what was the outcome of those samples taken to Noguchi. Now, I don't know whether the authorities thought that, look, that's the end of it because we are not hearing any deaths again, so probably water has found its level. Then from nowhere, we had 2 deaths again, recently. The question we need to ask...
Actually, 4 deaths.
4 deaths.
Recently, yeah.
Okay. So the question we need to ask is, what happened to information flow during the first 7 killings when the blood samples were taken to Noguchi? What happened? Why didn't they come back to inform students and parents of the outcome? It was rather when this brouhaha started that we were told that what happened then was meningitis. But that was too late. You realize that because of the break in communication and failure on the part of the authorities here, I'm talking about the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, to put in place public health safety measures to avoid some of these things occurring again, you notice that people were now speculating. Some will say it's overcrowding. Some even say it was evil spirits. I heard a former tutor of the school who said that, look, in 1974, similar deaths did occur. So it gave way, room for some speculation. But thankfully, we have been told by the Ministry of Health, I think with the Assistant of World Health Organization, that it is H1N1 flu, which is also called swine flu. But in the midst of all this, you notice that we were getting conflicting reports. First, from the Ashanti Regional Minister, second, from the Deputy Minister for Education, who was in Kumasi, then from the Health Minister. You heard him on one occasion, the Health Minister, is it the Minister for Deputy Minister, say they are going to close down the school, then the other person said we won't close down the school. What happened to communication on the part of government officials? Why couldn't they put together their efforts? It appears there was the Ministry of Education doing their own thing, Ministry of Health doing their own thing, and there was no coordination as to how to deal with the matter. And that, for me, is worrying. But
it's still on that point. It's interesting to note, yes, because I do also observe the back and forth of it, a decision to close, then later we are not closing. But the earlier decision apparently was taken together, I mean, the Ashanti Regional Health Directorate together with the Ghana Education Service and the school's PTA, which would have, presented a certain united front. So then later on, when we hear that, okay, we are not going to close, then it raises questions. What happened? So because you would have thought that there was some, agreement.
So it tells me that even at the region, they were much better coordinated than even at the national level when this matter came up. I heard the Deputy Minister for Education blame students, blame parents for evacuating their students. Really, does he think he wants to say that? I am on this program now. If I hear my child is in danger, I will leave this program and rush there. It's a natural instinct. Sure. So this blame, I'm sure he has to have a rethink of it and not to, if he had his child there, I'm sure he would have also rushed there to evacuate that child. So I think that it's a learning curve. And on other programs, I have indicated that very soon we'll be going into we are in the Harmattan season, we'll go into the hot season up north. There will be this meningitis as usual. They should start now putting in place mechanisms. If they are going to start vaccination, they should do it. They are going to start talking to each other, they should do it. They shouldn't wait when deaths are being recorded before they start acting. I think that this is becoming too much. But now that we know what it is, but I also heard your caution. I think I heard the
Ghana
Health Service say that it is not conclusive yet. But now that we know at least it is swine flu, they call it swine flu because the origin came from pigs. Yeah. What are we doing in terms of education to ensure that, because it is contagious, eh?
It is highly.
Highly. So what are we doing to ensure that maybe there's going to be some quarantine facilities? How do we ensure? For now, the disease is within the campus, but there are communities surrounding the campus. How are we going to ensure that it doesn't go out into the community? Particularly, my concern is education. How do we deal with this matter? Do we have to go back to the washing of our hands? Are we educating the students very well to ensure that they are able to not contract the disease again?
Right.
That is the work of the Ministry of Health now.
Moving forward,
yes.
To deal with the situation very well. Nana, quickly, Mr. Malibu has touched on a lack of communication in this regard. Indeed, parents have had reason to complain about the transparency in the whole process, as in they not being, you know, kept in the loop in terms of what is happening, and that's why there were panic situations. And they'll definitely go, like Mr. Malibu is saying, the instinct of a parent would naturally be to go get your kid out of danger. How do you think the school authorities handle the situation? Mr. Malibu has talked about, you know, the statutory bodies, if you like, but there's obviously a certain responsibility on the school authorities to have acted in a certain way. Let me hear you on that.
Good morning to your cherished viewers and listeners. I think that the school authorities, given the antecedent of the 7 death cases earlier on this year, I think they've not acted properly. And I believe that if for nothing at all, the least that could be done in the circumstance is for the Ministry of Education to engage school heads and teachers across board on how to deal with such situations when they come up. Look, there were 7 death situations. Nobody heard of what was discovered to be the cause. Then subsequently, this has repeated itself again. Now, what effort did the school heads make in terms of assisting to bring a resolution to the matter? I'm not saying they are health professionals. I'm not saying they have the expertise to do to bring an end to the matter. However, in terms of communication to the authorities that be in finding a solution to the matter, I believe they have a role. Some of the reports I heard was that even when they were preparing for their 60th anniversary, there were signs of the disease. There were evidence that some students had fallen ill all over the place, for which reason they should have called the attention of authorities. I think there were some serious defaults on their part, and the Ministry of Education would have to handle that going forward, how school heads would have to deal with such situations. But beyond them, I think we should get to the point where when such situations start occurring, politicians would have to step back and allow professionals to deal with it. Now, when you look at the interaction so far, it still has been the politicians at the forefront, whereas this is a specialist matter where you need the experts to be at the forefront, like we've seen elsewhere. For instance, when the Ebola broke out, you saw how the US dealt with it. It was more of the experts at the forefront, not the politicians. So going forward, I think that we need to have a clear structure as to how some of these things ought to be dealt with, okay? Because when we have the politicians, the issue tend to be politicized. We had somebody saying that it was because of the free SHS. Then you have somebody from the NPP coming to also counteract, losing sight or focus of the real issue at stake. And so I believe that the real professionals would have to step forward. But there's one key issue. The key issue, really and truly beyond the communication, has been the way and manner this has been managed, and which feeds into the necessity to have professionals move to the forefront and deal with the matter. Now, you have parents, some parents taking their children from the school, and indeed rightly so. That will be the first reaction of every parent. But now we are looking at the outbreak of the disease on Kumaka campus, and not those that have been transferred out by reason of the evacuation, and those that were exposed by visit to the school. For instance, the president was on the campus. And
we're told he was exposed to that.
He was exposed to that. And all this while, there had been that outbreak. and
to add to that, I mean, the 60th anniversary celebrations were attended by many people.
Many people
who left the premises subsequently.
Exactly.
So definitely there's
and
that
we all know
compromise.
We know that this is a contagious disease,
sure.
But we are now focusing on Kumaka alone. The disease now, from my perspective, from my layman's perspective, it's an outbreak. It's a national issue that should be dealt with beyond Kumaka. Where are the people? Where did those people come from? Where have they gone to? Where have the students been evacuated to? How many people have they come into contact with? Parents that visited the school, other guests who also visited the school. What are we doing? Now, that feeds then into the issue of communication or education. What do we have to do as a people going forward? What are the basic health measures that we need to put in place? Is there the need for some, if you like, some visits to the hospital and so on and so forth, for certain basic health measures to be taken upon us, to be administered on us, and so on and so forth? I think the Ministry of Health and the National Health Service would have to provide us with a comprehensive measures to deal with the situation, at the very least, in terms of the small things that we need to do.
Some public sensitization
of the issue, exactly. Exactly.
Very well. Now, Ruhula, here's the situation. I mean, we're talking about, the breaking communication, if you like, and then also, to some extent, some back and forth in terms of decisions taken. We're closing down the school, we're not closing down the school, and all of that. Clearly, a certain delinkage or a certain disconnect, if you like, from the authorities. How do we clarify that?
I doubt there has been a disconnect between the authorities.
No, because there was a decision earlier between the Ghana Education Service, the Regional Health Directorate, and the school's PTA that we're going to close down latest by the 8th. If situation, the situation doesn't improve. But then when the Minister for Health was speaking before Parliament, what he clearly stated was that the school wasn't going to be closed down.
Yeah, of course, because there are processes that you go through. That's why I say that I do not think that there has been a disconnect. First of all, there are regional, if you like, offices, okay, of various ministries and agencies of state, tasked with the responsibility of dealing with issues in the respective regions and districts. So if an issue happens in a district, the first point of call would be the district authorities to deal with that matter. If they fail, we then now move to the regional authorities to intervene. If they are not able to deal with that, then they call for, if you like, support from the national level. So even the judgment of the regional authorities, they thought that there was a need to close the school, and upon further consultation with national authorities, it was decided that there was no need to close down the school. There was a need to understand what the issues are and to attempt to find a solution to those issues. I think that it will not be sufficient to say that there was miscommunication. They were just following channels of authority in dealing with the matter. My brothers. So what's
the situation currently? Is the school closed down or what?
No, the school hasn't been closed down. Yesterday evening, the Vice President was there to assess the situation and to get official briefings on behalf of government, and to also assure parents that the World Health Organization was moving in vaccines to be able to ensure that the situation was brought under control. I would send my condolences to families that have lost their students. And I think that as a country, we need to improve upon the systems to be able to deal with some of these issues.
Very well. Now, quickly, I mean, there's this talk about the fact that it's quite worrying that lots of laboratories took samples, but they were not able to detect the actual disease, raising questions about whether we need, external support, or, raising issues about equipment and the fact that we're not able to determine what exactly it is. Is it that it's a new or a new variant of the influenza virus that is affecting the students, or what? The questions going down to capacity, if you like. Do you think that that is a justified or valid argument in the context of how things have been managed so far?
I think in the context of the delay in coming up with what really was the cause, they might be justified. I speak to the issue as to the issue of the 7 earlier deaths. If we had discovered what was the cause at the time, perhaps it wouldn't have come, up again this time. For it to have come up again this time, it means that we failed to go into the bottom of what caused the 7 deaths.
But it came out really that it was meningitis. That's the news that we heard about the first 7, right? So eventually, that detection came up. But it's the communication in that regard that was problematic, as in coming back, debriefing or putting that information out there quickly enough for people to be able to act upon that. That is it. So with regards to that, there was a certain delay. But in terms of this one, we are not even sure if it is. The reason why I'm bringing this up is, earlier on they were suspecting it to be bacterial, and then they were administering antibiotics and all. But clearly, it turns out to be viral, at least from what we are hearing.
But at the end of the day, it was still Noguchi that has been able to tell us that it's influenza. And so to say that we would need external help, I don't think it really comes up or it's really necessary now. But that is not to say that we do not need to invest in science.
Sure.
We have to invest in science. We need to build the capacity of our science and technology sector, particularly our health sector, to be able to deal with situations like this and those that will come up in the future. And so in that regard, to the extent that Noguchi is the one that has been able to tell us what it really is, I don't think the external help is necessary. To the extent that we also have to build them up for future occurrences, I think that is necessary. We don't seem to be investing a lot in science and technology in this country. I think that we tend to, focus on too many things that, for me, are not very primary to our very existence as a people. We need to invest more. We need to find out.
In other words, we don't value lives that much.
No, we don't value lives that much. That is a fact. We don't value lives that much. The importance we place on lives are very, very little. Now, we have to look at innovative ways, such as getting corporate entities to invest in healthcare, particularly preventive healthcare. Noguchi, for instance, has been around for some time. If you recall, it was the place where some of the tests on Ebola was also conducted, at Noguchi. So what it means is that it has some international respect, but do they have sufficient resources? I think that we need to interrogate that going forward.
Very well. Mr. Maliba, yes, you want to say something?
You asked the question whether we need external help.
That's what some specialists in the area have had to come up with, given the delay in, or the late detection of what?
No, if you listen to the press statement by the Minister of Health when he was breaking the news on this one, he actually said that they knew the cause of deaths, but they did not just want to put it out to create fear and panic. If you heard him in that press statement. No, he met the media, isn't it?
Yes. So it was a press briefing.
Press briefing. Then I said, really? You know the cause, but you don't want to create fear and panic? Is that a justifiable reason? So I think that there are some lapses. I think, let's admit, there has been failure on the part of government officials. What they should be doing now is to use this as a learning curve so that in future we will not see some of these things. But when Ebola struck in the sub-region, Ghana was used as a base by the World Health Organization, and we established a disease center. I don't know the real name because of my lack of knowledge in the health sector. But we established that center in Tema. We're supposed to replicate that in the regions. Ask the government what is happening. I'm told they have dismantled that facility. Because this facility would have assisted in this type of disease outbreaks, this swine, these highly contagious diseases. That was the intention that the center was put in place. And I think if it was still there, it could have assisted in this direction. So what has happened to that center? I'm told it has been dismantled.
But you're saying that that was to have carried on beyond
yeah.
the reason why it was set up.
Yes.
Because clearly it was
yes.
set up during the time of the Ebola
to go beyond
crisis.
the Ebola, and because we were the nerve center of trying to assist the WHO assisted us. We wanted to use that as an advantage to also strengthen our health system and ensure that we replicate some of them in the regions.
But it goes to what Nana was saying. I mean, the fact that it's important that we need to invest in science and research and all of that. And clearly, over the years, we have been deficient in that area.
That is not in doubt. And I'm thinking that even the idea to even establish the center, the Ebola center, and then continue with it was part of the capacity building for the country. But I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the moment, I don't have much information about that, so I can't really confirm or deny what the situation is, whether indeed it was dismantled out of, you know, a lack of resources or whatever it is. But Ruela, moving forward, trying to talk about investing in science, research and all to be, you know, build capacity and all of that, to be able to, if you like, preempt some of these things, and also in the event that it happens, we have, you know, an early warning system, or we're able to deal with it proactively. How do we deal with that? It's clearly going to be capital intensive, but it is a priority area.
Well, of course, it's a choice we would have to make as a country. As far as investment in science, research, and technology is concerned, it's non-negotiable for the future development of our country. So if we truly want to fulfill our development aspirations, we need to prioritize that area and invest heavily in the development of this area. And like he said, we can even rope in the private sector, because at the end of the day, it is to the benefit of all key development players in our development agenda, that if we have a healthy nation, all of us benefit. So as far as that is concerned, I believe that it is something worth considering. I think we should resist the temptation to make this issue a political ball game. I mean, we talk about establishing an Ebola center and why the government hasn't continued with it. I mean, Ebola broke out in 2014 and 2015. They had all the time to create the centers across the country. That has never been done. I think that it is not fair to say that this government has abandoned an initiative that you had all the time to continue with. Let us take away the politics, because we're dealing with human lives. It shouldn't be reduced to NPP, NDC ball game. Right.
Now, quickly, another thing. I mean, with these things, sometimes the optics of how it's managed is also important. And the optics here, looking at officialdom, if you like, and how quickly they respond to these situations. Now, some have had cause to complain about how perhaps officialdom reacted or dealt with the situation in terms of showing empathy, or, you know, being there to commiserate with the affected, you know, the bereaved families or students and teachers on campus. And I'll start with you. How do you think this went? I mean, there are those who are saying, yes, Mr. or Dr. Baumia was there yesterday, but perhaps they thought he went there belatedly, you know, several days after this, you know, breakout. This started on the 30th of November. And on the 8th of December is when, you know, we saw such high-level representation on the premises of the school. Do you think that this could have been managed better? I know it's better late than never, but... I
think one might say that was good the Vice President went there. However, there are others who are also saying that it was too late in the day. I think that it feeds into the general perception of the lack of agency, which was attached to the situation. When you look at how things are dealt with elsewhere, especially situations like this, you observe that they move in full swing. Everybody gets on board, trying to address the situation. The presence of certain officialdom might give an indication as to the kind of importance they attach to the situation. And so therefore, there's a school of thought that says that, look, it was good for the president to have gone there, spent some time to visit the school.
That is if he had gone, or if he could have gone.
If he could have gone. There are others who also thought that, for instance, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health, everybody should have visited the school, especially since they were in Kumasi for the Santa Hima's funeral. Yeah. But there's the other school of thought that says that, look, all that was required was for people and the necessary resources to be deployed to attend to the situations. And so once those were deployed, then that is sufficient.
That's why I speak of optics.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes we would want to downplay that, but there are times when, I mean, the optics, I mean, it's, you know, it's important. It helps the situation.
No, that is why I said that kind of optics could have given an indication as to the importance we place on such a situation as a people. Now, there are others who are even saying that if this had broken out elsewhere, would have all been on social media trying to show empathy and so on and so forth. And therefore, yes, it is necessary. I think that for those who matter, in their small, in their closet, wherever they find themselves, I think that there will be certain admissions they will make in that regard. But generally, it feeds into our lack of agency. I'll give you an example. In the year 2008, 3 children visited a farm and contracted E. coli. Suddenly on BBC, E. coli outbreak in England. The sense of agency that the Prime Minister, everybody attended to the situation, you know, gave you a certain sense that these people, they are not toiling with their lives. And to that extent, or in that regard, it would have been necessary for political officialdom to have attended to the situation with some sense of urgency, just to show that, look, we care about this situation, right? Beyond that, the deployment of resources would have also, you know, given a more, you know, would have given more evidence of that.
I hear what you're saying, definitely, because the presence of the president, for instance, would not bring the situation to an end.
Exactly. But then it also shows, it gives a certain, it communicates a certain message out there, right? And the default also communicates a certain message out there. Sure. And so going forward, I think that this should not be repeated again. The vice president has gone there, sort of remedying the kind of default in optics, the damage control. But going forward, I don't think it is something that we should repeat again. Whenever such situations happen, you have 7 kids that had died earlier on in the year, 4 kids, 11 kids. Look, and the fact of an epidemic outbreak, the fact, it stares us in the face. Sure. Given the circumstance, the numerous visits to the school by reason of their 60th anniversary, parents evacuating students, there is a potential outbreak, national.
We hear reports of the fact that the school as it is now, I mean, the gates are wide open as of yesterday. I mean, there's no cordoning off of the place.
Exactly.
So clearly, people can stream in and out, get infected, come out.
It's beyond just Kumasi Academy. It's beyond just Kumasi Academy. It's beyond Kumasi and the Ashanti region, because some entourage have gone to the school from Accra. We are looking at a potential national crisis, and that is the more reason why the attention of officialdom should have been, you know, focused.
Very well. I'll turn to Ruhula here, and then still on this, you know, the kind of reaction or the presence of officialdom or the lack of. Did this situation raise a certain level of emergency that we failed to address as such, or what in terms of, you know, the optics? And you see, sometimes people would say, don't care about the optics, care about the substance. But in certain situations, they go together. So that if one is missing, you know, particularly if the optics are missing, then it raises issue.
Well, my brother earlier on submitted that in cases like this, that it is necessary for politicians to take a back seat and allow the experts to be at the forefront.
In terms of managing it and what is being said, but to show commiseration?
Well,
empathy?
Government clearly has shown that from day one. From day one, Ghana Health Service officials were on the ground to assess the situation. They were collaborating with the school's authorities.
I'm talking about high level. You're talking about presidency, vice president, Minister of Education.
Because, you see, we create agencies to address specific social issues. The Ghana Health Service has been created to deal with situations like this. Where they need reinforcement, they appeal to higher authority. It is part of the governmental structures, unless we are denying that the presence of the Ghana Health Service officials wasn't sufficient to allay the fears of parents.
Not necessarily. So, I mean, let's put it in context. You do know that there's been times in this country where a disaster would occur, and the next thing you know, there's a certain high-level presence from government.
Yes, the high-level...
And that is what I'm talking about, not necessarily the specialist attention to it.
The high-level presence are always informed by reports from the ground. Okay, at this stage, it is necessary for these officials to intervene. Then they intervene. I mean, you don't just get up because you are president that there's an outbreak of swine flu, then you rush to the scene without any reports from the ground advising you on what to do and what not to do, who to contact and who not to contact. On the basis of the reports that have come through, the government, through the vice president, visited the scene to assess the situation and to announce interventions that government has made so far and would continue to make to be able to contain that situation. As far as I'm concerned, it wasn't too late.
It wasn't too late. Okay, better late than never. That's what we are hearing. But we'll take a break at this point. When we come back, we'll hear from Mr. Malaba, and then we will bring this particular topic to a close and move on to the other topics lined up for the conversation this morning. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday edition live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and we're streaming online on 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We'll be wrapping up on the conversation about the Kumaka situation, where some 4 students have died over the week, or over the past week, from a disease which is turning out to be swine flu. But earlier on in the year, we had 7 deaths, unfortunately, and indeed our condolences to the bereaved family of these students. I'll turn to Mr. Malaba here and, you know, throw the question about the optics to you and how it's been dealt with, but also touch on, I mean, in conclusion, what this says of our emergency response as a country. I think we talk about it all the time, but it seems nothing really has been done about it.
Let me tell
if Ebola were to break out in Ghana, really, it would be very devastating.
Let me tell my MPP friend that when we are talking about building the capacity of the health sector to be able to take on these matters, it's not politics. Simply telling you that continue with what the previous government has done. If we had done that, probably we would have been able to nip this in the bud. So that's not politics.
He did raise a very valid point, which is that this Ebola outbreak happened in 2014, 2015. I mean, you left office in 2016. So he's saying that if there was anything to have been done, perhaps we would have seen signs of it, but clearly none. So I think it's a fair comment.
It was under the NDC that center was established. And I'm saying that the center has been dismantled. Now, I expected him to have said that, well, he's not sure about it, he will check. But not to say that I'm playing politics. Playing politics about a center which has been dismantled? Is that playing politics? And if you are committed to building the capacity of the health sector, won't you continue, even if we didn't do what we wanted to do? Didn't you continue other things? So stop talking about that. It's about deaths. Now, there is the saying that we don't value human lives in Ghana. And what has happened actually confirms it. 7 students have died, and school authorities were neck deep in planning for a 60th anniversary. Some of these deaths do occur only when probably students are traveling long distances from the same school. Then maybe there's an accident. But mysterious deaths have occurred. And what you school authorities can do is to be neck deep in planning 60th anniversary. If you live in your family house and there are mysterious deaths, would your father celebrate his 60th anniversary? So we don't value human lives. The president confirmed this when he also went to Kumasi, failed to spare just 5 minutes of his time to address the students and calm them down. Calm them down. You know what it does to students when the president visits you? But we have grown and we have seen president, and we have, so maybe the aura around them is no more anything to write home about. But if a president comes before you, he's like second God, and he tells you that calm down, don't go home, we are bringing drugs. Because when the president says something, it's seen as gospel truth. That would have helped alleviate or calm down the situation. We failed to do that. And so I want to be frontal on this matter. And I want to say that it is belated that I heard him yesterday, the vice president in Kumasi. But maybe that could have been an afterthought. But it's good.
At least they're listening.
Yeah, it's good. At the tail end of it, I'm NDC, but I'll say that better late than never.
Definitely.
I wouldn't condemn everything. But the initial approach was bad on the part of the school authorities and government authorities. And elsewhere in some countries, look, everything will have come to a standstill.
Which is what leads me to a question, which is, at what point would we say something is an emergency? Because, you know, we typically, Ghana, people are likely to say, oh, it's just one person that died. But elsewhere, that would bring everything to a grinding halt.
That would have brought everything to a standstill. I think I cannot figure out why our attitude is that way. Is it because we've seen more deaths? When you send your car to the mechanic, the way they loosen your bolts and not they throw it. When you're asking them to say, oh yeah, they've seen it before. Is it that we've seen more deaths, that's why we don't care about deaths or what? So I think that we need some reorientation. This issue in Kumasi is more or less for me a national disaster. He made that point, and I agree with him, that the fact that it is that contagious, and even we expose our president to it without giving him the much needed advice. The president is the #1 person in this country, and any kind of protection he needs, he can get it. Security protection, health protection. He has advisors, top-notch advisors. It should be possible for a president to visit there with the right attire and gear, which can ensure that he's protected from the disease. Why are they paying all these advices for? Why are they paying them for? If you cannot give a simple advice to ensure that the president gets there and comes out safely. So I think that we have to reorientate ourselves. It's disgraceful the way we treated the Kumaka issue. And I think that parents who lost their children today, listening to us, would say that we are failing them in not pointing out to the state what should have been done. And I think that I want to be frontal on that, because it could have been my child, it can be anybody's child. And I think that time has come for us to say that never and never again should these things happen. We must have a way of ameliorating it and putting seriousness to it. I had the MP for the area also sounding very frustrated because probably he was thinking that the disease could go out into the community. I think that we need to ensure that these things are well managed, and government must focus its attention on some of these things next time around.
Very well.
Okay, quickly,
and then
I think that One thing that all of us seem to have agreed to is how the value we place on human lives. I think it's historical. When you listen to everybody in this country, it is about natural resources, our gold, our diamond, our bauxite. How many times have you heard people talk about our human resources? But time and again, it's proving that it's human resources that develop a nation and not natural resources. And so going forward, I think our focus ought to be on our human resources. That way, we'll place more premium on human lives.
Because clearly, as it is, I mean, we don't. Well, last words on this?
I think that the efforts so far are commendable. The World Health Organization would move in quickly with the vaccines, which at this stage is very, very necessary to prevent escalation. I think that going forward, we need to improve our emergency response systems so that in situations like this, we're able to respond promptly and to deal with all the issues which would arise.
Sure, and then the public sensitization, but
must continue.
Exactly. I mean, for now, announcements going as to how to, wash your hands, when you don't touch this, don't do that. All of those things are very important when it comes to prevention. I mean, the emphasis, like Nana said earlier on, should be on preventive, healthcare as opposed to the curative, because it costs more to, get into the curative aspects of healthcare. But we're moving from this topic to another area of concern, which is public service delivery by the ECG. Clearly an area that sucks, to put it mildly. And this week we've seen customers in Achimota, Kaneshi, Kolebu, Dansoman, those areas which fall under the, I believe, Accra West district of, or the Accra West region of the ECG's operations, who have not been able to purchase credits for their prepaid meters to be able to have electricity. I mean, people have cash, but they cannot have electricity. This is not a situation where it's about generation of power. We do have the power, it's just we cannot have access to it. Now, this is mind-boggling. I'll start with you, Buhula. ECG, your business is to distribute power. You have the power, but you cannot. I mean, customers are not being supplied with power because of this. They're talking about a server that broke down. What is the situation? Is it that ECG is overwhelmed by the market that it has? Because indeed, ECG has a ready and available market. People are ready to consume. Are they overwhelmed? Are they undercapacitated to do the job, or it's both? What is the situation?
Well, I cannot purport to speak for the ECG, but I can
clearly
rely
looking
on
at it from a distance,
the facts that are available to make my submissions. It is not in doubt that technology can, and in some cases do, fail. So it is not out of place that the ECG server technology would fail them. But I expected the ECG to have a crisis management plan that every service provider relying on technology should have, that in case our technology system fails, how are we going to deal with issues that would come about as a result of the failure? And I think that the PURC ought to have demanded that from the ECG, that let us have a crisis management plan. So in case you have a crisis, you activate that plan to be able to deal with these frustrations that would come. I think that in that regard, the ECG has failed, and the PURC has equally failed in upholding the ECG to this standard. I think that they must move in quickly, because at the end of the day, it affects businesses. There are those who rely on power not just for domestic purposes, but for commercial purposes. And so for such people, it affects businesses and ultimately would affect the growth of the economy. In that regard, there's a need for the ECG and PURC to work as urgently as possible to resolve the problem so that people can have access to reliable power supply.
But isn't it interesting that for a company as vital as ECG, responsible for distribution of electricity, you would have a situation where customers are denied access to electricity for a week. You talked about the fact that, yes, it's imperative for, such an organization to have a crisis management system to be able to deal with it adequately. So looking at it, is it the case that, I'm trying to situate this within the context of, for instance, look at telcos and how they run. I don't see how possible it is for a telco to have a downtime that goes beyond a day or two. That would never happen. So that goes clearly to the issue about the monopoly that ECG seems to be enjoying.
This development has provided impetus to those who believe that it is about time we privatize the ECG to ensure efficiency. That has been the argument that has been advanced by proponents of this view. I think that it makes sense because it is unacceptable that 1 week after this crisis, the ECG is unable to resolve the problem. I'm happy that the PURC says that the ECG ought to be punished.
We'll look at that sanction issue subsequently.
We are hoping that they will carry through the threat of sanctions because we need to signal these agencies that they can no longer take citizens for granted. Because at the end of the day, for somebody whose businesses would collapse as a result of this, what compensation would be made available to such a business entity? I think that it is quite unacceptable, and the ECG must act quickly to resolve this matter.
Very well. Mr. Maliba,
yes.
Rula touched on something, and I'm throwing that to you for further discussion here. Has another case been made for the ECG to have some private sector participation in its operations? Because we're clearly seeing that it's either the ECG is overwhelmed by its market size or that it's taking consumers for granted because it has a monopoly over the sector.
Well, I belong to the political tradition that initiated moves to ensure that we inject private sector participation in our electricity system. We started this, but you realize the opposition at that time kicked against us and made a lot of capital out of it. It was because of the efficiency to ensure that ECG is more efficient and is able to, provide the services that it is supposed to do. So I still maintain that, yes, if there's a need to inject private sector participation, let's go and continue with that and ensure that ECG will become very efficient. But the excuse being given, you may be more savvy in IT than me, but don't servers have backups? No, you may be, I don't know.
You carry on, yes.
They have, okay. So what has become of a backup when your main...
The backup also failed then, presumably.
Is that what they said?
They haven't said that, I'm just saying.
Okay. So that if they had prepared, and I'm sure they should know that technology can fail at any time.
Definitely.
So what happened to the backup system? It is no excuse to say that your server is down when, like you indicated in your intro, there's no load shedding, there's enough power to go around, and a section of our people have to sleep in darkness for 1 week. It's not even the sleeping in the darkness, because when we go to our village, some of us sleep in darkness. But yes. Your food, your inability to even iron your things to go to work and do your business. The people had cold stores. So I think that they should eat their humble pie, accept that they have failed the people. But in their explanation, I realized that there were two categories of customers.
Oh, yeah.
There were those who have been affected are those with the card system.
The old prepayment system.
Exactly. That is not smart. That does not communicate to their system.
That is not smart.
Exactly. So is it now time for them to begin to think that they should offload all of them to the new system so that we'll not have a repeat of that?
And doesn't that amount to some discriminatory practices then? Because clearly looking at the PURC Act, there's a certain, duty on a service provider to ensure that its services are not discriminatory. So because clearly these people on the old prepayment system didn't ask to be put on that prepayment system. So how do you make them suffer when you're saying others are on the very smart prepaid system?
And the worst of it all is the localization of the system. So they have districts. So your card is only limited to Kolebu district or whatever it is. So even if one could have come to Medina to purchase and go, you can't, you know. So they should look at all these things. But I think that it opens again the discussions on whether ECG, and now there are workers who are resisting, should also look at what is happening and see whether they will need private sector injection.
Because for the longest time, I think it's the workers who have held this whole process about, you know, their concession agreement and all back. But so clearly, we are getting a sense that, yes, it's about time we got it in. But Nana, to speak to the issue about privatization, yes, there's a call for private sector participation and all, but people make it seem as though, yes, the minute you have a private entity come in, the problem would be resolved. Yes, in terms of service delivery, maybe you would have it improved in terms of quality, but there's a risk about the consumer being taken for granted in terms of cost or the expense, because a private person is looking at profits. What do we do to ensure that, you know, if indeed the private sector participation comes in, the customers or consumers' interest in terms of expense would be, you know, adequately addressed?
The answer to that is avoiding a monopoly. That's the answer. But the case for privatization, I think that it's been made sufficiently so far, not just in relation to ECG, but many more government organizations. For instance, in our health sector, we need to look at a bold decision to transform it from government-owned to private sector, possibly private sector control. But since we are talking about ECG, I'll limit myself to ECG. Sure. Look, previously in this country, there was only one cement distributor. And we all realized the kind of disadvantage consumers, you know, suffered in terms of pricing. Subsequently, there have been other players, Diamond Cement, Dangote Cement, and so on and so forth. And now the competition is so
it's vibrant and people are benefiting.
That's right, and people are consumers are benefiting. You have a choice as to which one to buy, at which price to buy it, and now nobody is taking the consumer for granted. And so for me, I think
telcos out there. For example, we started with Ghana Telecom. That was something else.
I joined Ghana Telecom just after the transition. I saw the early stages of the transition, and I saw what it had become when the Vodafone Group was in full control. And I think that privatization is the way to go for us as a people. I mean, whenever you are making policies for a nation, you need to look at the sociology of the people. I think that our attitude towards government businesses are not the best. And therefore, we need to consider how private sector involvement will assist us to transform, you know, in terms of service delivery to the Ghanaian customer. Now, with ECG, that fear of monopoly becoming a disadvantage to the customer.
Even in the case of private sector participation.
Exactly. Can be resolved by liberalizing the sector and allow other people to come in. It has a lot of advantages beyond cheaper services and prevention of exploitation, to creation of jobs, growing the economy, and so on and so forth. But ECG in its current form cannot be sustained. It's a fact, it can't be sustained. The workers, how many are they? I don't think the workers of ECG are more than 200,000, as compared to the number of people who rely on the people who the customers who require their services, and the contribution that it makes to the economy. The economy of those customers, the economy of those employees alone, look, it pales in significance in terms of the greater disadvantage that the economy is suffering. And so we need to confront it head on and call a spade a spade. We cannot be held in ransom by the staff, you know, going forward. The government needs to attach a lot more seriousness to the privatization of the ECG. It's non-negotiable anymore.
I mean, we're showing the queues at the project office clearly. This has been going on all week long.
I'll tell you a story. Somebody walked into my office and was telling me about efforts that he had made just to get ECG to come and assess him for him to make payments. And it's not happening.
It's widespread.
It's widespread. No private person would allow this to happen in his business. Prior to Vodafone being privatized, Ghana Telecom being privatized, we're all queuing to buy their SIM cards. That gave Spacephone the advantage in getting a lot of customers because their services were easily accessible. You could easily buy their SIM card on the market, right? When Ghana Telecom realized that there was money to be made, Spacephone had gone miles ahead of them in terms of customers.
Penetration into the market.
Penetration into the market. And recently they were telling us that they have struck 10 million customers and so on and so forth. Now when Vodafone came in, it quickly doubled up. And now they have also captured a fair amount of the market. What does that mean? The private sector makes a lot of difference. When the businesses are owned by government, in terms of appointments, they are political in nature. Competence is not so much of an overriding consideration as much as political affiliation and loyalty and so on and so forth. That comes, at a disadvantage to the economy generally. And so I think that very strategic national assets and businesses ought to be privatized. For now, I think ECG, enough case has been made, and we should not allow the workers to hold us in ransom. In case of monopoly, we need to avoid the disadvantage that comes with monopoly.
Yeah.
We need to liberalize the system so that other players too will join, okay, and assist in growing the economy. There's so much to be gained in that regard,
right.
And I think government should consider that.
Very well.
The kind of privatization I would advocate for, particularly regarding our strategic companies, is where government still retains ownership, but would hive off management of the institutions to the private sector.
So government still...
No, it won't work.
Okay,
No,
you let him land
finish.
and then yes, we carry on.
So government still retains assets, landed properties, being the owner, but would hive off management. So for instance, who is the MD? Government has no hand in it. Advertise. Go for competence. And I'm talking about strategic, there's reason to still retain strategic companies as government or state owned. I'm saying this because people are also talking about sometimes you give the whole entity out, strategic, and you could be sabotaged. You don't know, and these are foreign companies sometimes who will be manning and managing. You don't know what they can do. And so you would still want to have ownership, but completely wash your hand out. And I can give an example. Ethiopia Airlines, owned by the Ethiopian government. The assets belong to the Ethiopian government, but management is out. And I think that, and we all know what Ethiopian Airways is doing. Yeah. So for strategic companies, I will advocate for ownership, but hive off management to the private sector.
Quickly, I'll come to you, but Nana, you wanted to react quickly.
Work.
So you think the private entity should be given assets?
It should be given controlling stake. It should be given controlling stake. Possibly government sells off about 60% shares and keeps 40%. Government might want to float some of the shares on the Ghana stock market so that other Ghanaians can buy some, and then sell some to an entity that is ready to buy the bulk of it, whilst government also keeps some of the shares so that it can also participate in the management of the company and ensure.
To what extent, at the end of the day, if government remains a minority shareholder, I mean, what could be done drastically in terms of from the government side?
No, you have public listing, you have government's participation, and then you have someone having a controlling stake. That can create a certain balance in terms of decision making. Now, it won't work because in our case, there is empirical evidence in that regard. Remember the Norwegian coming in as management consultants of Ghana Telecom, it did not work. Even TV3 before it was sold, there were management consultants at some point. It didn't work. It has never worked in our case. Look, you need to understand the sociology of the Ghanaian when it comes to such decisions. Political control of businesses don't work in Ghana, right? Political arrangements of hiving and so on and so forth, before you realize there's somebody who is acting as a proxy, controlling the business from somewhere for his personal interest, to the detriment of the greater numbers of the society. And so what I think is that we need to call a spade a spade. We have tried this from 1950-something. We have tried political control. We have tried management consultancy. We have tried private sector. There is evidence as to how the private sector managed businesses are thriving. By reason of competition, for instance, in the telecom sector, Ghana Telecom, which is now Vodafone, by way of brand, yeah. You can't say that has got monopoly in the market. On the market, they don't have that monopoly. They are competing with other players, and so therefore, we are spoiled for choice, right? And there's no disadvantage to the Ghanaian customer. I'm saying that there should be liberalization first and foremost. Government can keep some strategic shares in there and float some on the Ghana stock market to allow for some balance in decision making, and not somebody taking a rough shot and saying that I want to do this and that is all I want to do and take advantage of the Ghanaian. So there are certain systems that we can build even through competition and so on and so forth that would avoid somebody taking advantage of us.
The whole system.
But as for holding on to the assets, hiving off management, we have tried it. It won't work. We are a different breed of people. We need to accept who we are and make decisions accordingly.
As it is.
How different are we? When you cut my body, what blood will come? Is it green? So I think,
talking
look,
about sociology,
we agree to disagree.
About 30 seconds and I bring Ruhula.
We agree to disagree. It's okay.
Exactly, we disagree to disagree. But let's bring Ruhula in here. Your thoughts on this? Yes, the way to go. Clearly, there seems to be that, you know, it's resonating around that indeed it's about time we got in the private sector participation. But getting into that too requires some thinking through. What kind of private sector participation are we looking at? The balancing acts of it are very important. We need to think through that to ensure that at the end of the day, we get the best we want out of the deal.
Well, I think all of these decisions have been made. The NDC signed the Millennium Compact soon, which was an essential requirement that ECG should open up to private participation. Few terms have been renegotiated under Boacha Jaku to allow for greater government control. The issue now...
Greater Ghanaian control.
Greater Ghanaian control. The issue now is the payment of severance package that has been an issue between the ministry and the workers. The minister and the ministry are determined to go through the processes which was started by the NDC, because there's that unanimity that inefficiency is the bane as far as ECG is concerned, and that the only way we can do that is to open it up to private participation. So in that regard, all the political actors are united that we need, because at the end of the day, it is the interest of the Ghanaian consumer that ought to be protected and respected. And so government would continue to pursue the processes to ensure that ECG is open up to private participation.
Very well. I have an interesting message coming in here. Perhaps we need to interrogate it. Now, this one is saying, good morning to you and your panelists. Let Ghanaians know the reason behind the ECG behavior last week on the prepaid card. They have planned to run down the company, so to justify the need for privatization. Please let the management of ECG know that the God of Ghana will not forgive them. They should resign. Ibrahim and Tumu. You know, there's that speculation too, that this is being done to, you know, as it were, endorse the call for privatization. Because indeed, let's put it out there. During the media visits, the people there, the aggrieved customers, were saying, let's sell this and let's bring in people who can effectively manage this. So clearly, on their own, there's that agitation. So would you necessarily say that this is an, you know, being instigated?
I don't think
exactly. Well, I mean that's
because the ECG people are the ones who are opposed to. So I doubt they would want to sabotage the system.
But it's interesting this text came in, because indeed that is a speculation out there as well.
We have a certain taste for conspiracy sometimes. And so people might be, reading a lot of conspiracy theories into some of these things. But the greater factor is our personal attachment to businesses and entities that are state-owned and our fear for privatization. And so historically, you see demonstrations even against government for when it comes to privatization. Hence, some of these suspicions and so on and so forth. But I say that beyond what has even happened, before this, there have been evidence that ECG as a business, as currently run or in its current model, is not sustainable. Look, which businessman will allow his money to be in debt without not recovering it aggressively? Which businessman? So that people use your services, and when they use your services, they chase you to come for their bail. They chase you to come and pay you. No private businessman will do that. Now, if ECG in its current state is not so concerned about how much is in debt, so much so that they are chasing for that debt. If ECG in its current form is not concerned about backups to its service to prevent people not having access to its service and so on and so forth, then in its current model, it is not a good business model. Why is it not a good business model? Because of the way and manner it is being presently run. If it was being run by a private man, it would never happen like that. And that beyond what has happened, there has been enough case made for privatization of the ECG.
So, okay, Mr. Malvai.
So they didn't need this.
This
wasn't necessary.
What the texter said is a little far-fetched, unless he can prove that probably government that is pushing for the privatization has infiltrated the ranks of the workers, and some workers are now doing this so as to get it sold.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But I'm gratified that we've come full cycle. The MPP now in power has said that they agree with what we are doing,
so that
and
it
then
even
can continue.
Clears any suspicion of a certain backing to this.
In the campaign period, they used it against us, played the workers against us, and we are where we are today. But it's gratifying that we have come full cycle.
Full cycle. Rula, you wanted to say something?
Well, I mean, like I said, the agreements were already concluded even before the NPP won the election. It was on the basis that the Americans advanced the Compact 2 money to the government of Ghana. And so what the NPP did was to simply renegotiate few terms to allow for the Ghanaian interest to prevail.
Very well. Let me take some messages coming through. This is Alhaj Zaid in Adenta. He says, may the soul of the dead in Kumaka rest in peace, but this should wake the authorities up. But Abna, Honorable Nituwu, okay, you're talking about the allegations about state lands being sold and all of that. Well, we'll get into that when we have time. We'll add that definitely. Good morning. In a real fact, it says nothing has changed. Things are rather getting worse. Okay, so you're preempting that discussion, which we'll be having very soon. I'm not a member of the NPP, but I voted for them because of the promises. But almost a year, nothing seems to be happening. Okay, good morning, Abna. Now that we know the cause of death of some students at Kumasi Academy, I shudder to say that the information given by Dr. Bashiru Kikimoto that an affected student with H1N1 influenza virus must have brought it from home to the school is lame. I'm not sure about that. Why has he not considered checking on the source of meat, chicken, and mackerel served in the dining hall or food sold by vendors around the school? That's Isahako in Tamale. Good morning, all. Kumaka, I don't think we are serious as a country, always politicizing everything. In other jurisdictions, heads would have rolled, considering the fact that this started in March early this year and authorities slept over it. Blame should be put squarely on the Health Minister, Education Minister, and top directors in the various ministries. This is a clear case of incompetence, nothing more, and that's IB. Good morning, Abner and your panelists. Why Kumaka again? There might be something hidden there. Else, so why should there should be an investigation to dig deep into the real issues. Abna, good morning. Okay, Mr. Malwa to come to Tema General Hospital to confirm what he heard about the Ebola Center rather than sit and churn out. Okay, you're saying that isn't true. Well, we can verify that. Aziz Donlen says H1N1 influenza outbreak is a worrying situation and it needs emergency attention. Nevertheless, Ms. Anituwu's statement was so unexpected, unfortunately unhonorable and irresponsible. As a sector minister, I will personally respond to him. Okay, very well. We'll get into that conversation soon. Let me take this. Good morning, Abna. I'm very sad this morning. Why? Because we have a sector minister who claimed to know everything but could not manage this H1N1. It says, may Allah save Ghana, the only country we have. The Kumaka issue could have been attended to even before the public became aware, but the Ministry of Health always wants to see a number of cases before drawing conclusions and taking action. This is what has led us to this stage. It is too bad for us as a developing nation. And this is coming in from Gracious. I'll take the last one here. Frank Kwabnedu says, initially we didn't know it was H1N1. We got to know of it after laboratory confirmation from Noguchi. So are they expecting the president to go to the scene without knowing? Causative agent and mode of transmission, please. He needed technical advice from experts on health, not political advice as usual. Thanks for the messages. Let's get to wrapping up on this issue, but let's look at the PURC and its statements coming in at the time it did. I think Ruhula touched on that a bit, but let's go into it. Now, the PURC is threatening to sanction the ECG, and it's looking at some monetary penalties. Now, my question is, to what would that achieve if there's a penalty? At the end of the day, we'll go to government coffers, wouldn't it? So the point is, how is the PURC standing up for the consumer? For me, that is what I'm looking at. And the issue about compensation comes in. Mr. Maleba, take us on that. I think issue about compensation for damages or losses suffered by consumers. I think
the PURC also came in late. They should have warning signs, signals, to be able to come out quickly to deal with the matter. I think that the PURC should not be looking at fining the company. No. My proposal, and I did this within the week, is to compensate the affected customers. So, for instance, I think they've done it before, is to give them extra amount of credit or units, But if you just fine them, that money is going to the government chest. And the person who has been affected on a daily basis will not immediately feel it. Not that he won't feel it in future, but immediate. And the person needs an immediate relief. So if you make an order that, look, give them extra units, I'm sure it will assuage their pains. You asked the question of, what did you say? You asked a question on something, I've forgotten. I
think it's a compensation issue. And I think
the compensation,
yes,
okay.
The compensation. That whereas they're looking at the sanctions and the penalty payments and all, why don't they look at compensation? Because the act, that they are establishing acts, gives them that
power to
exactly,
do. And they've done it before. I think they've given some consumers some amount of credit before.
So they could do that because you're looking at 7 days. People have businesses. If you have a printing press, for instance, if you have a cold store, if you so many losses could have been occasioned to, people there. And it's not for the people or consumers to make a complaint. Yes, that is allowed, but the PURC on its own could make orders, even in the absence of that. Yeah. Having regard to what happened. So, Nana,
I think I agree with Amaliba, Mr. Amaliba. I think, I believe the proper way forward is for the PURC to make, to compel ECG to compensate the affected customers. I think that's the way to go.
And that should be done.
Compensation is very necessary.
Within as soon as possible, but compensation that would ensure that people restored to their their previous or the state in which they were before.
Exactly.
They cannot be restored fully.
Yes, at least some compromises definitely could be made. I'll take some more messages and then we'll quickly move on to look at the issue about election 2016 a year on and what has happened. Now, this one is coming in from Kofi B and Kofi. He says, good morning, TV3. For me, I have started enjoying the illegal power. How can I stay out of light for 7 days, yet all we see is ignorant authorities giving us excuses? Please, don't engage in illegalities. I mean, seriously, I don't think there's any justification for that. So please, abide by the rules and the law. Musa Abatwa in Kumasi says, now, unfortunately, as a country, we always wait for tragedy to strike before running helter-skelter looking for solutions. 6 months down the line, 7 children died at Kumaka, and it's happening again, which is avoidable. The question is, what have they done? Or what did they do when the endemic broke, and what measures have been put in place to prevent future occurrence? Somebody must sue the health minister for negligence. The reactionary leadership we have in this country is also surprising sometimes. In the morning of the anniversary celebration of the school, a student had died. Not a word of consolation was said by the president when he had the opportunity to speak. The president was at Malaysia and never thought to pass around to at least speak to the students, and then suddenly the VP rushes there to do some damage control of sorts. And that's from Berima in Junijuni. Good morning, Abna. The lack of urgency has exposed the president to the H1N1 influenza during the 60th anniversary celebration at Kumaka. That's Alfred Morty and Dan Suman. And one other coming through, in fact, quite a number of them, but I need to be wrapping up here. Good morning, Abna. Are we serious as a country? A very important service provider such as ECG does not have a backup for its operations. Indeed, ECG privatization will do us good. That is Matt Lyon in Ahafu Shidem. Good morning, Abner and your panelists. Let Ghanaians know the reason behind ECG. Okay, I think this message came through earlier. Let me take this one here. Good morning, greetings to your panelists. I think privatization of the ECG is crucial, knowing how well they are faring, or how well they are faring regarding their responsibilities. It's high time government gave ears to the workers of ECG in opposing, cock ears to the workers of ECG in opposing the privatization agenda. That's Stanley in Ashaiman. Thank you for your messages. We'll draw the brakes on here, but we'll get back to it at some point. So quickly, let's move on to election 2016. 1 year on, we are assessing how far government has come. And of course, let me just put this preamble. Of course, some have argued that 1 year in the government's 4-year mandate is too soon or too early to assess, comprehensively government's performance. And then there are those who will quickly remind you that so there's that balancing act we're looking at here in our attempt to assess how far the government has come or how the government is faring almost a year after winning the elections 2016. Then I'll start with you. Clearly the outcomes of 2016 was, there was that overwhelming mandate. You're looking at the margins. 53.85%, NPP 44.4, almost 10% percentage point difference in the clearly a very resounding mandate that was given to the NPP. What should that mean for this government? And do you think that government so far is exhibiting signs that it really appreciates the kind of mandate the people gave to the government or the NPP?
I think that the results from the 2016 elections, was unprecedented in many ways. First and foremost, it was unprecedented in terms of defeat for an incumbent government. That was the first time. The first time we experienced such a departure was in the year 2000, which was the first time a certain party's term had come to an end, and so Ghanaians voted that party out of office. This time, another history was made where a certain government lost elections, so it was unprecedented. The sitting government did not lose elections by a very small margin. It was a very bold margin. Close to 10%. And so it was unprecedented in that regard. This time, there were traditional places where the NDC was strong, and the NDC lost there. For instance, with Safia Kontomra, these are places that ordinarily would never vote MPP. They voted for MPP. So you ask yourself, why this unprecedented, results? I think that it was a clear message that we wanted to depart from the status quo and move to a transformed Ghana, because the MPP was selling the message of transformation in industry, transformation in governance, transformation in the economy. So it was a very bold message, transformation everywhere. Okay. Now, Nana Addo takes over the reins of power. Early stages, clear signs that he's in a hurry to pursue his agenda. He himself said in Parliament that I'm in a hurry. Fantastic. Put together a team of government in record time. It was unprecedented. Ministers appointed unprecedented.
The numbers were unprecedented too, 110. Yes.
I'll address that. Now, I think one fact seems to be lost on the government now. That fact is that the actual duration of his tenure, it is not 4 years. The actual duration of his tenure is 2.5 years. Now, like what he did, if you
mean the actual is 4 years,
it's 4 years, but the practically, sorry,
yeah.
The practical duration is 2.5 years. I mean, he did very well to put together his team of government, the members of his government very early. So 6 months. Now, don't forget the last year of your government is not scored, because people actually think that. Yes, people actually think that you are trying to buy votes. You are trying to do that to please cut the eyes of people for vote. And so you will be assessed, your performance will be assessed for the 3 years. That 3 years, you take out the 6 months where you put your team
of the first year. So like you have 2.5.
You have 2.5. And so when he put together his team, and then people were saying that the numbers were too much, and he organized a press briefing to explain why he had put together a team. It really dovetailed into his personal theme that he was in a hurry to deliver. And so it sounded good at that point. But now, I think that he needs to take stock of where he has come to so far. There have been a lot of pluses, but I think that going forward, there's that real risk of not achieving what he set out to achieve. There's that real risk. And I say so advisedly.
Hold your horses on that. We need to take a break. When we come back, we go on to that. And we'll be back after this break. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday Edition. See you in a bit. Welcome back. This is New Day Saturday Edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and we're live around the world on the internet at 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. Just before the break, we opened the conversation about an assessment 1 year after the 2016 elections and how far government has come, how well government is faring in this, if you like, almost 1 year in being in office. I will go back to Nana to wrap up on your submission. You had started, so carry on.
I think that government is doing well. Great program so far. Free SHS, very bold initiative.
But with challenges.
With challenges, of course. There can never be any program without challenges. Look, when the Koreans started manufacturing their vehicles, we sat here and said they were manufacturing substandard vehicles. Today, it's sought after all over the world. And so there can never be any program that you initiate and then it is all perfect. You shape it along the line. So those challenges are to be expected. So going forward, government would have to shape it. A lot of great programs. But I said there are real risk. Paperless port, paperless this, they are very good. They are formalizing the economy just to increase revenue so that government will have more money to pursue its agenda. But we should be careful not to choke the economy with too many programs that we are launching. Because when you have too many programs, you run the risk of inadequate supervision. A lot of them may even fall through the bridge. Okay. And so that is one of the risks. But one of the things that I've also observed, that government, there are very low-hanging fruits that government is not attending to. For instance, in the area of environment. Government said one of the reasons why it had appointed or separated the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources was to give it a certain agency approach so that we can address the issues in that sector very well. Now, I think that I'm not sure whether it is the person that occupies the office or the office itself that is failing in terms of the scope that was assigned to the minister. I'm not sure. But this is what I would say. Look, and I'm speaking to the numbers. So
you're saying sanitation is one of the low-hanging fruits
it's government could have low-hanging fruits government could
tackled have easily tackled and satisfied Ghanaians in terms of the change Ghanaians. The Ghanaians voted for. That would have
had the effect of even potentially reducing our health budget. Because, you know, the numerous diseases, the common diseases are tropical diseases.
But why do you think government isn't doing well in sanitation?
No, sanitation, I'll tell you. Now, the minister for water resources and sanitation, two issues. One of the primary victims of the Galamsey menace was our water bodies. When the issue broke, we didn't see him anywhere. And in politics, the optics is very important. We didn't see him anywhere. Subsequently, our sanitation and environment wasn't seeing any transformation. You know, at the very least, would have seen what he came to meet. For instance, the monthly cleanup exercise. That one, we didn't see any enthusiasm on his part to even keep it, at the very least. Okay. Now, this is a government that had gotten 53%. And so it would have been much more easier to get a lot more people to come out than the NDC had gotten for even the monthly sanitation. And that, at the very least, he should have maintained. We didn't see anything of that. And so that is one ministry the government would have to look at. It's either the hiving from where it used to be is not helping, or the person that occupies that office is not really pulling his weight. And so, in pursuant to Nanado's agenda of bold transformation within the shortest possible time, maybe he would have to review that sector. Now, there are various other, low-hanging fruits. For instance, the existing structures when it comes to even our health sector, in terms of ownership of our hospitals. I believe that we can pursue serious transformation in that sector to generate revenue, to support the national health insurance, whilst we allow the private sector to deliver quality health care for us. That Nanado can even do within 2.5 years, right? Now, another sector is the agricultural sector. He's doing very well with that planting for food program. But we don't see the communication, we don't seem to be seeing the communication in terms of potential beneficiaries, bringing a lot more youth into that sector to expand agriculture, to transform agriculture.
But they talk about the Nation Builders Corps, which includes, agri comes under the Nation Builders Corps program, I believe, right?
Yes.
So definitely, ultimately, there will be some recruitment of people for that. For
agri-extension works, yes, and so on. But we are talking about the entrepreneurs in the sector, farmers, real farmers who are investing in the sector. Now, the Nation Builders Corps is another plus. But one thing, and obviously you would see that is one underlining thing this whole analysis, seem to be centered on.
Right.
It looks at the implementation of the numerous programs. The programs are brilliant, but it looks as if the implementation, right, seems to be having too many challenges, which we need to address. going forward, government would have to take stock of its own team and look at whether or not the team, in terms of the personnel, are competent or capable enough in pursuing its agenda.
Quickly, then I move to, I think I'll move to Ruhula, then Mr. Maliba. Speaking about the team, you remember when the president announced the 110 ministers and there was that backlash, if you like, that numbers, this is huge, and I mean, we need to cut down and all of that. What the president said was, basically, like, not to quote him exactly, but wait and see what they bring to bear, and then you'll be able to determine whether the end justified the means. Are you saying that there's an indication that, well, the 110 may probably not be churning out anything good? After all,
we need to take a stock of it now. We need
do you
to
think it's about time we cut down on the number?
There are so many low-hanging fruits that government can pursue to please the optics.
But
and
so
let
far
Ghanaians know that, look, in the short term, in the long term, we are looking at transformation of the economy. In the long term, we are looking at educating all our masses. But in the short term, we are getting our streets clean. In the short term, in the short to medium term, we are looking at transforming our health delivery systems, building a stronger health insurance through transfer of resources from, let's say, we've sold Kolebu. We sold our controlling stake in Kolebu to a private entity. Let a private entity deliver the, do the delivery of service. We are investing the money in our national health insurance to make it more robust. We are passing acts, for instance, to make sure that all private employees.
But could that be done? Could that have been done in 1 year?
No, I'm saying that you can initiate the processes. So we need to know the short to medium term policy goals, and then we can say that in the long term there is hope. Now there are a lot of programs which for me are in consonance with their campaign promises, but the implementation has faced too many challenges. We need to review that.
Very well.
He needs to take stock of the number of ministers. Look, for instance, in the area of
30 seconds.
In the area of information dissemination, people are now asking a lot of questions in respect of that ministry. Do we need 3 ministers? Because every now and then people are saying that, look, government information dissemination has not been the best.
Very well. Very well. I'll move to Ruhula. Ruhula, to tell us what has changed. Nanado is now behind the steering wheel. John Dramani is out. Nanado in. What has changed?
Well, a lot of changes have occurred in the last 1 year. Critical to every nation's development agenda is the economy. And so if you want to assess whether or not a government is doing well, it is always important to pay regard to the macroeconomic fundamentals, because it is these fundamentals that we use to assess an economy and to be able to pass a verdict of whether the economy is doing well or not. Indeed, critical to the NPP campaign ahead of the December 2016 presidential election was our contention that the economy under President Mahama was being mismanaged. We cited data from official sources to buttress the point that the economy as it was being managed was not competently done, and that given the opportunity, we would turn around things. It is not in doubt that we ended 2016 with a GDP growth rate of some 3.5%, which many economists said was the lowest in the last 20 years. What that means is that in 20 years of fiscal management of the economy, it was in 2016 that we recorded the lowest growth rate of 3.1%. We promised that, given the opportunity, we're going to pursue policies, first of all, by removing what the then running mate termed nuisance taxes, so as to move the economy from taxation to production in order to spur economic growth. When we won the election and we presented our maiden budget in March, as many as 12 nuisance taxes were abolished. And the rationale behind the abolishment was to spur up private sector participation in the economy so as to increase economic growth and to create job opportunities. Today, it has been reported that the end of year growth is likely to be 7.1%. I mean, on the basis of these data, one can say that change has truly come to this country. Beyond the
But
GDP,
these indicators you're talking about, don't they manifest after a period of, you know, implementation of certain policies, so that it's not necessarily a reason, but as a result of a couple of months implementation? Because really, effectively, government started, you know, working 7 January 2017.
Well, it has been a deliberate policy of the Akufo-Addo government that has resulted in these achievements. I mean, it's not just the GDP growth rate that has increased from 3.5% to almost 7%. We are also looking at the debt to GDP ratio. Indeed, so bad was it that the IMF classified Ghana as high risk debt distress country. Indeed, the then running mate called it HIPIC, a heavily indebted middle income country. Okay, and we said that because we had crossed the critical 70% mark, needed to transition from a stable economy into a debt distress economy, and indeed we're doing 73%. So we said that the rate at which the Mahama government borrowed vis-a-vis the debt to GDP ratio had put our economy in complete jeopardy, and that there was the urgent need to reverse the trend if we wanted to spur up economic growth. Today, through the ingenuity of the Akufo-Addo government, we're doing 68%. That's about 3-4 percentage points. I mean, that certainly has been changed. The interest burden on Ghana's debt as a percentage of our tax revenue has equally reduced from 45% to 43% as of September, and it is projected to end December at 41%. So what it means is that the revenue that we were generating, the amount we were using in servicing debt, has actually reduced. And this can only be the result of a prudent economic management. And so if you look at these data, coupled with the fact that inflation has been on a steady decline since January when we took over, as well as the fact that the cedi has enjoyed some stability, relative stability against major foreign currencies, it tells you that competent hands are in charge. And all of these things are reflecting in the data that we are getting.
But there's an issue about how well government, or how not too well government has done in terms of revenue generation, which goes
that is not
our
correct.
Attempt to, you know, deal with our the deficit that we currently have.
The argument about, I mean, the contention that the fact that we have not been able to meet our revenue targets means that we have failed in the management of the economy, really, for me, is not a rational argument to make. First of all,
that is not the argument that because you've not met your revenue targets, you failed in the economy. No. It's a factor to be considered in the management of the economy, and we're raising that. So that is not necessarily saying we are concluding that because that has been
the data
low.
Showed clearly that we have done better this year than we did over the same period last year. But we must bear in mind that revenue shortfalls has been a phenomenon in the last 5 years. The only difference this time is that government is spending within its means so as to be able to control deficit. That's the only difference.
But yeah, the fact that revenue shortfall has been, you know, on a consistent decline over the past 5 years is why I asked the question, what has changed? Because that is the basis for, you know,
in 2016, we raised revenue of a little about 35 billion Ghana cedis. This year, we have done 37 billion cedis. The target for 2016 was 26% of GDP, which was missed by 11%. We set an ambitious target of about 33%. That we have missed by just less than 10%. So clearly, even when it comes to revenue mobilization, the data shows that we're doing better than the NDC. The primary balance, which is a measure of the difference between revenue raised and expenditure, save interest on debt, shows clearly that today we are in a surplus of 0.3%. For 3 out of the 4-year mandate of John Dramani Mahama, primary balance consistently had been in deficit. It was minus 5% in 2013. In 2014, it was around minus 4%. In 2016, it was minus 1%. In 2017, it's a surplus of 0.3%. So what all these data showed clearly is that in terms of management of the economy, we are doing far better than the NDC did. And that clearly is a manifestation of change. Beyond managing the economy well so far, we have also instituted, in my candid estimation, an unprecedented social intervention programs. The free SHS program, one analyst said that is the single most important redistribution of national resources since post-independent Ghanaian history. That a government decided to absorb fees of over 400,000 students, okay, throughout public schools in this country. I mean, the impact on our human resource development would be monumental. And in
but
that
the challenges, yes, I must admit, Nana raised that for every program you are faced with challenges. But don't you think that the scale of challenges we are experiencing with the implementation in its early days has an impact, or could have a potential impact on quality of education, which would lead to that transformation we are so desirous of?
Well, I think that, first of all, challenges were expected. No doubt about that. And in launching the program, the president was well ahead of time when he said that we will falter, but we won't fall. We will not fall. So we envisaged that there will be challenges. But indeed, the challenges...
But if you envisage that, data, I mean, I'm sorry I keep coming in, but I think it's worth interrogating. But if indeed that anticipation was there, then why the level of, for lack of a better word, maybe chaos that we saw in the early stages, all of that? I mean, because it brought out, there were a number of issues that came up. The director of the Ghana Education Service on his tour did acknowledge the various experiences he had witnessed, the challenges that the schools were going through and all of that. So indeed, yes, there was an anticipation of these challenges. So perhaps that should have put government in a better position to address certain things. Or you're saying that had it not been for that, then we would have seen a much worse situation.
Government has moved in to address some of these challenges as quickly as possible. It has to do with beds, it has to do with dining tables, it has to do with dormitories. And the Ministry of Education has quickly moved into award contracts, okay, to deal with these issues, because there are only few schools that these challenges are experienced, and so it is within the reach of government to be able to address them as quickly as possible. And mind you, the 2018 budget has increased allocation for free secondary education.
I mean, it definitely had to, because you're looking at 2 years in 2018.
And that increase, coupled with the new entrants in 2018, are all designed to address the challenges that would come. First of all, with the pioneers of the program and those that will come in. So government is determined to sustain the program. So in terms of social interventions, I think that the free SHS is a laudable initiative and a fulfillment of our campaign promise. We had promised that we would reform the way we do business in our ports. In March 2017, this year, the Vice President called a port conference in which the government of Dubai was represented. Government appealed to them that it wanted to transform our port from how it used to operate into a paperless system to allow for increased revenue and port efficiency. Today, that has been fulfilled, and people who have gone to the ports to clear goods testify that indeed efficiency has come in. So as far as the management of our economy is concerned, the social interventions are concerned, there's indeed change. We have passed a bill for the development authorities to deal rapidly with specific development needs in the various regions. There are 3 northern regions. I come from the northern region. Since 1957, there has been the talk of bridging the development deficit between the south of our country and the north of the country. The NDC attempted it through the Savannah Accelerated Development Authority, and we all saw the challenges that bedeviled SADA. And so we said that there was a need to have a Northern Development Authority which would be professionally and competently run to be able to target specific development needs of the people of the northern region and to address that. Indeed, government, before the passage of the Northern Development Authority bill, had set up a 10-member team to do a needs assessment. It was across the country. And on the basis of the needs assessment report, the Ministry of Special Initiatives recently awarded contracts for the construction of over 3,000 boreholes across the land.
But how different is the Northern Development thing from the SADA? Is it just nomenclature, isn't it?
Well, it's because the point is that SADA had failed. And so as part of our development agenda, we thought we needed a new vehicle to be able to implement our vision for a transformed Northern Ghana. Lastly, agric is critical. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And we know that for 8 years that the NDC governed this country, the performance of agric, because they inherited it in 2009 at about 7%, and by the time they exited office, agric had declined to about 1%, I think in 2015 or 2016. And we promised that we were going to change the trend, because there's no way, I have made this point repeatedly, there's no way any government can deal decisively with poverty levels in this country by failing to prioritize agriculture, because we admit that it employs a substantial number of citizens. So if you want to truly address poverty issues in this country, you must prioritize agriculture. The 2018 budget has reported that agric did far better this year than it did last year, thanks to the vision of Akufo-Addo to launch the Planting for Food and Jobs program that has spurred up growth in the agric sector.
But are you really saying that the Planting for Food and Jobs contributed to the levels or the indicator we are seeing?
Yeah, because it allowed government
Did it take off, really?
It did, because government reduced fertilizer, for example, fertilizer prices by 50%, and it allowed for easy access of fertilizer by farmers. And we know what it does to yield. Okay, so one cannot wish away the fact that that policy intervention aided the growth rate that we saw in the agricultural sector.
But I'm struggling to get that bit, because, you know, we have issue with statistics coming from the Ghana Statistical Service and timely to even input in our budgets. For instance, 2018 budget made lots of reference to, you know, levels or indicators as of June 2017 and all of that. People had cause to raise issues about that, and the response we got was that, well, we don't have the information or the statistics or the data readily coming from the Ghana Statistical Service, because there's always that delay in getting. But you're saying that for the Food and Agric, the Planning for Food and Jobs program, you were able to get all that to be able to say that, yes, within the months, the few months that the program took off, it contributed that much?
It is not correct to say that a reference is made has in the 2018 budget statement have largely been references to
not largely, I said
because some have been made about September.
Sure, but there are some too that are in June.
We're waiting for the last quarter. That's why I said that, for example, that the interest payment, interest burden on Ghana's debt had reduced from 45% to 43% as of September 2017, and was projected to end the year at 41%. So clearly, in some instances, we made reference to September whilst we were waiting for the last quarter. But the bottom line is that agric has done better this year than it did last year, largely because of government policy interventions. First of all, of reducing the prices of fertilizer and making it readily available to ordinary farmers. So in that regard, the Akufo-Addo government ought to be credited for such interventions. So there has been change. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Very well. Mr. Maliba, let's hear from you. What has changed?
Well, what has changed is that we have a government that keeps promising, but there hasn't been any meaningful change. This government thrives on sloganeerism. They are good at coinage and to hoodwink the people to think that something is happening.
When you say hoodwink the people, are you saying Ghanaians are not discerning enough?
Ghanaians are discerning. That's why they are now saying that they have changed their color TV for black and white. Let's take one district, one factory. The president indicated that by November this year, there will be a number of industries rolled out. You can send, this time, don't send your newsman, just send your cameraman to go and take pictures of those industries for us. The one that they said they were going to establish in the central region around the Ekunfi area has been overtaken by weeds. This government has indicated that it was going to put in place a number of interventions that would alleviate the plight of the Ghanaian people. Even those that they said they have implemented, you still have huge challenges. Take the free education, which started with just the first years. Which started with the first years. See the way our children are sleeping rough. You ship children from their homes and they go and sleep in such a way as if they are refugees. Now, apart from schools and the trees, we have dormitories and the trees, dining halls and the trees. We even have kitchens and the trees. You find that they cook the food and the trees.
Which schools are these? I haven't seen any dormitories and the trees.
And we have seen students sitting on blocks to study. You've also seen children.
You know, seriously, let's interrogate this. I get that the challenges facing the implementation, yes, they are real. But I think there are times when there seems to be an oversimplification of things or making it seem like this is the first time certain things are happening. I mean, we're trying to put things in context. Students sitting on blocks on the floor is not a recent phenomenon.
In secondary schools,
they've been happening.
No.
It's been happening over the years. I think we need to acknowledge that, yes.
Yes, what we had, and I agree, were junior secondary schools, primary schools, and we used to call them schools under trees. We were trying to even remove them and give them comfortable places, not secondary schools.
Which, under John Mohammed's time, we're told had been eradicated, but apparently
we have never said. We said we were eradicating them, we were removing them, and you shouldn't think that that will even end, because as you remove them, communities put in more schools. You don't have control over that. Secondary schools, which secondary school did you have students sitting on blocks? But even if it were, aren't you compounding it? If you cannot hold the floodwaters, and that's been my favorite quote, if you can't hold the floodwaters, don't open the floodgates. If you knew about these challenges and you couldn't even address them, you are now compounding it. The MPP has always felt that they are building, but they are rather destroying. It is the NDC that rather comes and perfects the situation. I can give you a number of examples. Look at the mess they have created at the senior high school level.
What's a mess? Now, 400,000 students have gone to school for free. Parents are commending government for this, that they haven't had to pay fees.
Have you heard parents? Have you heard some parents go back to the school and say they are begging them, they should let them pay?
You said some.
But why should some go and do that?
So still, there are some who are also benefiting from this.
Because the situation is not well implemented. The program has not been well implemented. That's why some are saying that, look, we beg you, the way our children are sleeping rough, go to Vitim Secondary. Here in La, when teachers talk, when headmasters vent out the challenges, they are dismissed. There are examples of that. One of their key members, Dr. Mwanko Tofo, said he wept when he saw our children sleeping rough. Do you think that if these were grown-ups and they were workers, they wouldn't have hit the streets by now, saying that they are living in deplorable conditions? Because they are children.
So you don't agree these are teething challenges with a a policy which is in its infantile status, and that it could be dealt with eventually?
It is foolhardy to implement a program without at least a feasibility study, which is primary, which will tell you that if you open the flood waters, you must be able to open to keep the gates. Even in football, maybe you don't go for football match. When we're children, I'm sure you assume
I don't go for football matches.
Tell me that you go. Tell me that you go. Then that's all. There's no debate. Now, 5 minutes to the end of the time, 10 minutes, they open free gate. People get injured in the rush to go and watch the match at the last end.
Please because hold your horses on that. We need to take a break.
Oh, why?
When we come back, you will continue.
At this time?
Yes, so your analogy is still intact. We come back, you continue with that. You're watching NewDay Saturday edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is NewDay Saturday edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and we are streaming live on the internet at 3news.com, also on Facebook at TV3 Ghana. Just before the break, Mr. Malibu was making the submission. I'll return to him to continue, and then we'll take some messages coming through.
So, Abena, Ghanaians have indicated that after 1 year, they haven't seen anything.
Ghanaians have indicated?
Yeah, you didn't listen to the voice box or what is it?
Which one?
Didn't you hear people?
When?
Oh, well.
No, I'm just asking. Maybe something happened I didn't hear. I just want to know.
A year ago was so... a year ago they indicated that they were going to go for change. They went for a change. And what they are seeing now is not what exactly they expected. Food for jobs.
Planting
for food and jobs. Are you aware, as we speak, the extension officers, graduates, who were employed to assist farmers on their farms, for 7 months now, they have not been paid? They've not been paid. I have received calls from the Brown region and some from the Upper East region. And if you fashion out such a good program, but your implementation, again, is found wanting, we will point it out. A year ago, a gallon of petrol was 14 cedis. And when he was on his statistics, you know, I have always been consistent. I am a human development
index
person. And that's why under the NDC, I said that it is development. If I went home driving on a rough road, but the following morning, when I get up and I'm coming through that road, I see a bitumen road, for me that's development. He was on his indexes. Gallon of petrol was 14 a year ago. Today, it's 22. I heard him talk about dollar and said the cedi is stable. A year ago, by now, the cedi to a dollar was 3.7. What is it today? 4.7. A year ago, cocoa farmers were receiving free fertilizer. Today, cocoa farmers are buying free fertilizer with the inscription, not for sale. That is their economy. That is how they feel. And that is how they will say that this government has hoodwinked them into voting for them. Port charges. As we speak, their own supporters from Agusokai, the spare parts dealers, have been crying about port charges. It has, exponentially increased. They are unable to clear their containers. So for me, it is about the bread and butter issues. They came with a zeal to fight corruption. 240 trucks of premix. These are not, it's not like this container that you can put in your pocket. 240 trucks meant for our fisher folks have been diverted. And as we speak, we cannot even find the head and tail of it. 240. When those vehicles have been fitted with tracking devices, the fisher folks who voted, and the premix politics, felt that they were voting for a government that will come and ameliorate their situation. Premix committees have been disbanded, and MPP apparatchiks have constituted themselves into premix without knowledge in that area. Just as how the invisible force took over the Kintampo waterfalls, and it led to those challenges that we had. So 1 year on, what are we seeing? 1 year on, we have not seen any substantial change in the living condition of the ordinary Ghanaian. Taxi drivers have complained bitterly. They even want to go on demonstration. The police is stopping them. And so, let's call a spade a spade. We expected that a government that put in place 110 ministers would have done better. But the index does not show. The index that shows that petrol was 14 and is now 22 is worsening the plight of the taxi driver.
But on petrol, isn't it a deregulated regime now? How does the government come in?
I know you are playing the devil's advocate.
I'm just asking questions based on facts.
I know you are playing the devil's advocate. When fuel prices increase under our regime, what did the MPP say? Didn't Otiko Jaba even describe President Mahama as a wicked man? Where was that your question that you just asked me now? It was missing. You couldn't.
I hear you, but I've asked you a question. If you have an answer to it,
that's
fine.
The answer. That's the answer.
That's your answer. That's fine.
So, government cannot be detached, because as part of the components for pricing of petrol is the dollar-CD ratio. And so if you mismanage your currency and it devalues, it is not strong, it will feed into the calculation. So that's where government comes in. And they've said that several times to us. The vice president, who in his 100 days said that they had chalked 103 successes, and even said that the CD, he has locked it up and given the keys to the IGP. I am telling him that the dollar is a fugitive. He should go and look for the dollar. The dollar has bolted. Mr. Vice President, look for it. You see, if you do politics with everything, it will come back to haunt you. Today, they are still promising 1 child, 1 chocolate, 1 farmer, 1 warehouse, 1 bank account, 1 Ghanaian, 1 bank account. The ones, and that's why I agree with him. Don't choke the system with so many. It's humanly impossible. But they keep doing it because they did it. Ghanaians bought into it. They think that they can continue to do it. That's why the song is there. 2020, we will show Nana.
Yeah. Okay, Nana, carry on.
Quick interventions. I think that.
No, not this Nana.
Yes, we do know.
Quick
we
interventions.
Know what you mean.
I think that one of the biggest mistakes anybody can do in terms of the analysis of the MPP's government, Nanado's government, would be to benchmark it against the NDC. Because Ghanaians rejected the NDC. They rejected them completely. The economy was not being properly managed. It was a well-known fact. In terms of leadership, responsiveness.
So if you don't benchmark it against that, what are you measuring? What are you?
We are measuring it against, today Ghana is a small part of a global world. We are benchmark it against best practices elsewhere. How countries which are of similar age as Ghana manage to transform their economies. That is the benchmark. Now,
but even the one you say is West.
The
one you said is West, that's the NDC, has performed better.
No.
And I've given you statistics.
No, I'm coming.
I've given you statistics.
I'm coming.
People's conditions are worsening.
No, you see, I believe that on such programs, I mean, I've got my political sympathies, but on such programs, I'd love to do intellectual analysis. And so we can do a little comparisons in that regard. When you do the comparison in terms of responsiveness to the cries of the people, you realize that even when you compare Nana Addo to John Mahama, you know, he seems to be better. When the people said we don't want the toll levy, he withdrew it. When the people said, when there was a hue and cry about corruption in respect of the two deputy chief of staff, he quickly let the state machinery go there to investigate the matter. So in terms of his responsiveness to issues that come up, he is far better than John Mahama in that regard. But in terms of where we want to get to, because don't forget, Ghana has become a very, you know, we have become very exposed to the global, you know, happenings on the globe simply because of social. It's a global village. You know what is going on because of social media, because of the internet, and so on and so forth. And we believe that when we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone ahead of us, like the Singapores and so on and so forth, we can leapfrog a lot more places than others are, you know, have got into using information technology and so on and so forth. And so it is in that context that you do your analysis that the government can do better. Now, free SHS, it is clear that the reception that greeted it, people love the policy. Government would have to now find a more creative way of dealing with the funding, because obviously funding is going to be a challenge. Now that people have accepted it as a solution to our illiteracy problem, now that people have accepted it as a way of distributing the resources of this country, perhaps the argument about the Heritage Fund can now kick in. Whether or not it's a resource that we can fall on to develop, to push our educational agenda, particularly in the area of free SHS, than keeping it for future generations, because the future starts from today. And so we need a lot more creative ideas than, for instance, the budget that was presented, the fund that the Minister for Finance is thinking of. You understand, the voluntary fund. Now, in terms of even maturity, when it comes to governance, the kind of communication from the presidency, the effort, you know, towards creating the impression of transparency. You see, for instance, when the issues about the number of ministers that had been appointed broke, quickly Nana Addo organized a press briefing to explain himself as to why he had appointed. So in that regard, there seems to be some difference. But when you compare it to where we want to be as a nation, considering the timelines that the government even had, as I started with my analysis, as I said earlier on in my analysis, that practically you have 2.5 years. So 2.5 years, you don't go for too many programs. You limit it to very few programs. In the short term, you focus on low-hanging fruits. In the long term, you initiate certain programs which, if Ghanaians consider that, look, when you look at the low-hanging fruits, our environment are clean, our health sector is running well, our education sector is running well, let's give them another term. Then you can finish those that you have started, those long-term, medium to long-term programs. But if you don't tackle the the low-hanging fruits in the short term, then you are opening yourself up for attacks. Because, for instance, planting for food, for instance, you are not expecting it to yield any serious gains within the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to take time. paperless port, and so on, all those things. It's going to take time. So tackle the low-hanging fruits, okay? But in terms of comparison, I don't think the NDC is a benchmark in this analysis. I think it would be unfair to Ghanaians who voted overwhelmingly to kick the NDC out. It's not a benchmark.
That's the point. The government that you said was not good and its benchmark was bad. That government, when we put the statistics down today, in terms of what I just read, is doing better than the government that has come in. I just gave you petrol prices. This affects all of us. And clearly, you have seen that conditions are becoming worse in this country. It's because the government that we voted for has not provided answers to the challenges that the people faced. So if he says that you shouldn't benchmark this government to the NDC, when indeed we can show that the NDC did better in terms of these matters I've talked about, then I don't see where his argument lies. Look at the issue of the free SHS. When we complained about the horrible situations in which our children were living, you heard a reckless comment that came from the Minister of Education. And I don't want to repeat it on this program. We all heard him. So, if the NDC was horrible and did not do what was expected, and that the economy was not on the right footing, I'm sure Nana Addo wouldn't have appointed 110 ministers, because then there wouldn't have been money to be able to even cater for this 110. The successes that we are seeing in this administration could not have been as a result of the 1 year stay in government. You indicated that these things take a long time to materialize. And so if today you have agric performing, it can be your food and planting for food. When did you do your planting for food and jobs? Have you even harvested?
Very well. I think
have you even harvested? Agric is doing well because of what the NDC did in that sector. You know, cocoa production has increased this year. It's not what you did.
Very well. Well said. Let me move to that.
In my earlier submission, I believe viewers would agree with me. I provided substantial data. And to use that data from the NDC and data under the NPP, to do a comparative analysis and to point out clearly that on the basis of the data that we have, that the NPP has done better than the NDC. Amala, in responding, decided not to dispute the data, but to set his own benchmark, what he calls human. He
uses human development index.
How do you measure the performance of an economy? You can go the way you are going. I am also going the way I went. Human index development.
That's fine.
If somebody cannot get water and he can now get water, that's development.
That's fine. Yes.
You know that.
You've made.
So how can that be my
He made reference to it. Let him carry on, and then we can.
But even
conclude.
if we are to accept his benchmark and to use that as the analysis, I dare say that his life today is better off under Ekufuor. Unless, of course, he's going to deny that in Bongo Central, where he comes from, he has never been asked to pay fees for secondary school students. I can say that every year he pays not less than 2-3 students. Fees for him now? Unless he's going to deny that on air, that he has never done that in his constituency.
If you are inviting me here, I will interrupt.
So let me make. Let's assume
people
that
are still paying for school fees, school uniforms.
Let him land.
Let's assume
he's making his submission.
Let's assume that every year, every September, Mr. Amalaba pays for 2 students, okay, from his constituency, Bongo Central, to enter senior high secondary school. I believe this year he would have been saved the payment of 1,400 Ghana cedis. It makes sense. Okay, his life would be better to have 1,400 Ghana cedis and to buy petrol out of it for 22 Ghana cedis, than to buy petrol for 14 cedis and still go ahead to pay over 1,000 cedis to 2 students. I think the teacher trainee out there.
So what happens to someone who is not benefiting from
Abna,
free SHS and who still has to pay petrol at that price?
I'm using him in this context to show that even if we are going to use his benchmark, his life today has seen change compared to what it would have been last year. But the teacher trainee out there knows that change has come to this country. Because at the time that he was supposed to buy petrol for 14 cedis, he was paid nothing in the form of allowance. Today he's buying petrol for 22 Ghana cedis and he's being paid monthly allowance. The nursing trainee out there who gets to receive 400 Ghana cedis every month would prefer that situation, okay, and to buy petrol for 22 cedis than to buy petrol for 14 cedis and not receive anything from government. So clearly, even if we had to use the human development whatever, change has come to this country. I'm not sure that the 17%, 17.5% that we abolished on airline tickets is not to the benefit of Mr. Amalaban. He's benefiting that he's saving some money as a result of that. The taxes we removed, which puts to the Ghanaian pockets directly, okay, over 400 million Ghana cedis in the form, because taxes that were supposed to be paid have been retained by citizens and being used productively to better their life. So even that benchmark showed clearly that events in this country are manifesting that indeed competent people are managing affairs of the country, and nobody can dispute that.
But what is the most popular mode of transportation in this country? Which mode of transportation do our people patronize? The woman from Sefiwe so coming to Accra with her wares, does she fly? So if you go and reduce air flight tickets and you increase fares, lorry fares, because petrol has increased, have you addressed his problem? Petrol keeps increasing. Drivers factor it in. It goes to affect the economy of that woman who is bringing his wares into the city center. And you sit here and say you've reduced air flight. How many people take air flight?
We ran out of time, but let me take some messages here and then wrap up quickly. This one is coming in from Jake and He says, my experience is that free SHS is real in Ghana. It's not like the NDC, so progressive plan. NPP 1 year in government, there's allowance for nursing trainees, free SHS planting for food and jobs, free seedlings for farmers, Ghana Post GPS, Ghana Identity Card launched, and positive signs of the economy and creation of jobs for the unemployed. That's Maxwell in Talenty. This one says, good morning, and Abner and your panelists. Let Ghanaians know the reason behind, okay, I read this, the ECJ situation. Good morning, Abner and your panelists. When you have a president who only knows how to talk to destroy his predecessors and forget he has been given a nod for 4 years, this is what happens. It says this incompetent government has been lying ever since they took power, but absolutely nothing has been done these past 12 months in office. That's Osman in Tamale. I disagree, he says, with the gentleman touting fertilizer provision as a way of improving the lives of the ordinary farmer. Fertilizer application to farms only increase weed germination, and also providing fertilizer without providing weedicide is simply improving the lives of the elite farmer. Go down there and see how many ordinary farmers are unable to afford the needed weedicides that enhance crop yield. Fertilizer and weedicide application to a farm are twin necessities. The other half continues to die. That's Solomon Agbo. So let me take the last one here. It says, whether massive loss or not, I can't see anything that NPP is doing. Nothing seems to change. Politicians are after personal gains, but not the welfare of this country. Imagine the salary of each politician multiplied by 110 ministers and others. God have mercy. The last one says, this assertion of private companies being better managers is not wholly true. After all, when UT Bank and Capital Bank collapsed, it was Ghana Commercial Bank, a public bank, that came to the rescue. Okay, so I think that's a whole different situation, but that's for another discussion. But thank you so much for your messages. Lots of them coming through, but I wasn't able to read all of them. But we do appreciate your time. We do appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with us. We'd like to say, yes, a big thank you.
What's the matter?
A big thank you to our panelists, Mr. Amaliba, Nane Jebafwewa, and Ruhula Komeni. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.